Well, hello everyone. I know some of you are still joining. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so very much for being here with us today. We are going to go through some tips and tricks for mid-level giving. I'm joined by my very good friend Carlin. We've known each other for years now, so I'm glad to spend some time with you in this capacity. A few housekeeping things before we get started. Everyone is muted on the call, so we encourage you to ask questions and chat to us. We really welcome that. Let's have an open dialogue around this subject as we go through. If you have any big questions or success stories, we would love to hear those. We are recording this and we will certainly send it out afterwards. So for those of you who made it, or maybe you had a coworker who couldn't make it today, please know that this will be accessible. And with that, I will go ahead and let us go. So, Carlin, I will let you go first. Please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Carlin Cholsky. I'm an advancement specialist out of Missoula, Montana. I got my fundraising career started as a call center employee, calling for my beloved alma mater, Ohio University, almost 16 years ago. So I am happy to be here. Since then, I've done a lot of annual giving and major giving work and capital campaign consulting. So I'm thrilled to share why I'm so passionate about mid-level giving with you today.
Thank you, Carlin. And I'm Christina McPhillips, and I've been fundraising for almost 20 years. I got my start doing data entry out of college at a Red Cross in the Washington, D.C. area. And I'm sorry, my voice is a little rocky today. We have a cold going around the house, but we're going to make it through. Um, and then I have fundraised over the years for animal welfare groups, libraries, health and human services, education groups, environmental groups, you name it, I have done it. I focus more on encouraging individual donors to become supporters of groups through things like direct mail or digital strategies. A lot of times, doing research and surveys to learn why donors are giving. So, with everything that we've just outlined, we hope that we can provide you some really educational information today. Let's go on to talking about our first part. I'll leave this to my friend, Carlin.
Yes. So, what is mid level giving? It really kind of depends on what your organization is. So, it's really relative to who your donors are and what your operating budget is. But for the most part, it's in the $1,000 to $10,000 range. A good way that you can look at this to think about how your organization could define it, since it is so fluid, is if you were to pull a report of all of your gifts over the last 2 years and look at it in third segments. And that group that's in the middle would be your mid-level donors. So maybe for you, that's more like 500 to 7,000, or 500 to 7,000. Maybe it's a little bit on the higher side. Maybe it's more like 5 to 12,000. It just kind of depends on how that spread of your third mid tier is looking when you're taking a look at your data.
Excellent. Let me highlight a couple of really interesting things for you. When it comes to why mid-level, you may be bringing this idea to like other staff or your board or something like that, and you're saying we really want to focus some efforts on mid-level donors, and they might say, why are mid-level donors important? And who are the mid-level donors? And Carlin has just outlined who those people are, but mid-level donors are really important because they make up a significant revenue portion of your file. So while they are 3 to 7% of your active file, and that's not a huge percentage, they make up 35 to 40% of the revenue that's coming in because, as Carlin said, they are giving at a higher level than that $100 donor. Of course, they're not giving a $100,000 gift, and that's totally fine. But this group is really significant because they are giving larger gifts.
And one of the most important things you can do with these kinds of donors is really invest in the kind of stewardship and engagement strategies that you're using when you're working with them. Half of these people are making a gift for the first time at that mid level. However, they've known about your organization for years. We'll talk about how long it takes to potentially convert them in just a little bit. But according to this Nonprofit Pro article that's cited at the bottom, we have there's the data that shows that they've likely become passionate about your organization since they were in their like early to middle adulthood. So they may have been attending your events or volunteering for you or getting involved with you in the back end without potentially raising their hand and saying, I support you as an individual, and now I'm going to support you as a donor. So when these people are coming forward for the first time, it's not likely that they're just now hearing about you. Of course, we have those ones that kind of come out of the blue, and we love to see that too. But for the majority of these folks, they have been aware of the impact that you are making, and now they are choosing to give at this mid level. But what's important here is that they're 90% likely to renew their gift at that same exact level in years to come. So, really thinking about the way that you're stewarding those people and how you're keeping them engaged with your organization now that they've taken that next step themselves is a great way that you can think about refocusing on how you're treating those mid level donors.
Yeah, yeah. Before we get too far from this topic, Carlin, there is a question from the audience, and it's when talking about that middle third that we just talked about a
Mm-hmm.
moment ago, is that middle third you're looking at by amount donated or actually number of donors?
Oh, the middle third of the amount donated. Great question. So that's where the $1,000 to $10,000 gift could fall. And similar to how this is kind of unique to each organization, that could be single gifts of that level, or it could be their cumulative giving at that level over the course of your fiscal year. So
Yeah.
it's kind of however you want to define it. This is loose on purpose because if we were to have hard and fast rules about no mid-level giving is $1,000 to $10,000, that's not applicable to everyone.
Yeah, great. Excellent point. So let's dive into the timing for this. I think this is something I really want to emphasize to the group because, as I mentioned before, if you are going to other staff or you're going to your board to talk about why you should be putting resources and time into cultivating your mid-level donors, you need to know that the data shows that it can take an average of 8 years for someone to reach that mid-level giving threshold. So you are playing essentially a long game, and that is okay. But building everybody on the team's expectations around the fact that you may be talking to these people for a long time in many different ways, and their giving level might not go up. That's all okay. If you think about it in the context of 8 years, someone's disposable income can change greatly. Someone's affinity for your organization can change and grow greatly in 8 years. So it's important to understand this is not going to happen instantly, but it is well worth your time. And with that, I always love to show this chart. I remember this from, it's so basic, from my early days of fundraising. This is essentially the ladder of how people go from one level to the next up. So every single donor has a long-term potential to your organization. So I work very heavily in acquiring new donors for nonprofits. So I look at the bottom of this and say, okay, we bring someone in through acquisition, and that might be direct mail or digital channel, online ads, something like that. And then we continue to talk to those people, again, through direct mail or other channels for years, and they become a multi-year donor. A multi-year donor is so very valuable because they continue to give to you for years and years, which is leading us to that 8 year path of when they may become a mid-level donor. So very, very important. And then over time, that person that you acquired is going through the steps and hopefully they become a major donor and potentially they can become a legacy donor. I also like to think you could acquire a new donor and perhaps they join the board or they advocate for you in some other way. So it's just important to know that each person that comes in does have the capacity to do so much more for your organization. So my takeaways from this are always be acquiring new donors and consider every donor so special that they could have the possibility of really participating with your organization in different ways.
Yeah, and I'll add that this isn't always linear, right? It's actually just a 10 to 15% likelihood that those mid-level donors become major donors. So we love to see the acquisition. We love to see people staying on board. And then when they get to that time that they step up to the mid-level giving, that could be the plateau where they end up hanging out. But mid-level's a range, right? So they could increase from becoming $1,000 donor over the years to becoming somewhere in the $10,000 range, but never quite go up to what that next threshold is for what your organization considers major giving. And that's perfectly okay too, because there's still potentially 35 to 40% of your overall revenue that you're getting. So whether they end up kind of plateauing out at that mid-level giving, there's still a lot of room to how you can grow that relationship and that donor's involvement with your organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what it looks like when somebody does come on, when you've acquired that new donor. So, as I mentioned, this is the pipeline we talk about. Like you bring somebody in top of the funnel and you're bringing them down to the funnel where they would make larger gifts. So, step one, direct mail donor comes in, online donor, first time ever gift. Then step two, you are really thanking that donor with a handwritten thank you letter, a typical tax receipt, maybe even a text message. Really encourage those. Very inexpensive, but very effective for a thank you touch point. And then they go into what we call the qualification process. So that's where you're really assessing the donor's potential. We are going to spend a lot of time in this webinar talking about assessing a donor's potential and how you can find that potential. And then once you have identified the person, you're going to assign them to a staff member or a board member for number five, those meaningful contacts. And those meaningful contacts are phone calls, inviting them on a tour, inviting them to an event. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. So let's move on to our next section, researching the donor, which is where Carlin is the expert.
Oh, thanks. So I'm not going to spend any time talking about wealth screening software because I know those are often cost prohibitive for organizations. I want you to be able to have some really tactical things that you can take away from this. So the first one is starting within your own database. So I always encourage people to run a report maybe over the last 3 or 5 years to see who is giving multiple gifts in a year, who's increasing their giving from gift to gift, whether that's multiple gifts within the same year that are increasing in value, or just year over year, they're increasing the amount that they're giving cumulatively. And then also thinking about the timing of those donations. Are they giving every time they get some sort of touch point from you, whether it's a thank you card or just a general newsletter update from your organization that of course always has a very soft giving link ask in there, right? So maybe they're engaging with you on a really high level and choosing to make 25 or 50 $100 gifts most of the times they get a communication from you. That's a huge green flag. You want to be really making sure you're contacting that person because they are saying, hello, I love you, and I want to hear from you. So that's a great sign if they're choosing to make multiple gifts every time they respond. At the same time, it's also a really good sign if they're just kind of sending in seemingly random donations throughout the year. That could mean anything from they were out with friends and they were all talking about how much they appreciate your organization, or they see what an impact you're having firsthand because they drove by the park and saw your kids from the after school program out there. It could be any number of things, but your database is going to tell a lot of stories that help you do some sleuthing before you even go beyond that. So start with what you already have because there's going to be a lot of telltale signs just from the donations that they've been giving themselves.
Yes.
So beyond that, there's opportunity, of course, to just do some standard Google searches. So the kinds of things that you want to be looking for are, of course, any news articles that exist. If you search their name and then find that they're listed on 3 boards in your community, that's also a great sign that they're really engaged in a lot of different ways. Maybe they'd want to be engaged with you in that way too. Perhaps they have a bio that's listed through their company, or if they are involved with your local university or any other places that might have a little bit more information that just give them some of the qualitative pieces that might not be coming from the quantitative things you just looked at from your data. So taking a look at what all of those things together can paint for you is a great idea. In addition to that, one of my favorite things to do, no shame, is looking at other organizations' annual reports online. Because if you don't have access to a wealth screening database, you may not have that kind of art and science blend of what this person's holistic capacity is. So you can find that out on your own. One way you can do that is by looking to see if other organizations' annual reports are posted and see if there's a range where your donor might be listed. And then, of course, also looking at Zillow, it's like a little creepy, but it's always kind of nice to know what that home value is. that they may be living in, with the caveat that, of course, real estate prices don't always translate to actual liquid wealth. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about this. But all three of these pieces together help with that third tier that Christina was talking about from the previous slide about when you're doing the research on this donor. So coming back to that pyramid as a whole, you've acquired them, you're taking a look at them, and then you've done this research report to see who these donors are in your database. Now is the time that we're really digging into the meat of who this person could be and their long-term impact with you. And that is really where we're going to be able to find who these mid-level donors could be, and then also who the mid-level donors already are that might have some capacity to move up within that range. So all of these practical sleuthing tips together can help you identify both prospective mid-level giving donors, because perhaps they have some capacity that you found from those other potential resources, or you're seeing it from other annual reports, or you know that they're already in your mid-level range and you might be curious to see how they could step up their giving.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so two things. One, if you have any questions about what Carlin just said about the way you can dig for the information, her practical sleuthing, please let us know. Two, I want to tease out. We've got one more section and then we're going to go into 6 actual strategies that your organization can implement. So stick with us. Okay, let's talk about owning the outreach. And as we get started in this, I always want to boost everybody up with a certain level of confidence. Our surveys and research at Carl Bloom have shown that if a donor is giving to your organization, you are likely one of their top 3 favorite nonprofits. I was on another webinar early this morning and we were discussing, given the current environment of so many nonprofits asking for money, should organizations pull back and not ask? And the answer is a resounding no. Keep asking, because we in the nonprofit world think that so many people are interested in so many organizations because everybody is asking. We're very in tune with the asks that are going on. It is not the case to the donor. They are probably being asked by 3, maybe 5 organizations. And if they're giving to you, it is because you are one of their favorite organizations. So feel free to act like it. When you are walking in the door and you are talking to those mid-level donors, know that they love you, they care about you, they've given to you at a significant level before. You do not need to pull back on anything at this time. You should walk in there and you should feel confident in talking to them the way you would in any other time. They care about you and your mission. So let's build ourselves up before we go through the next parts.
Absolutely. So as we're thinking about portfolio sizes, this is kind of across the board. So this is just making sure that as you're balancing your major gift and potentially elevating your multi-year givers to your mid-level givers, maybe in that 10 to 15% moving to your major givers, this is where, to me, the sweet spot is of having 30 to 50 active high touch prospects that you yourself can manage. Anything more than that is pretty unwieldy for a person. And anything less than that, you might find a lot of attrition in the donors that are coming through without having kind of a backload ready to fill those spots as they're coming in. So having around 30 to 50 that are broken out in these 1, 2, and 3 year timeframes of when you expect to potentially make a bigger ask of them, or by the time you've cultivated that relationship enough, that's kind of the way that we like to think about structuring that. But my main takeaway that I want you to have right here is that if it's not in the database, it didn't happen. So as you're thinking about the steps that you're intentionally taking to make sure that that relationship is built with this mid-level donor, or on the front end or the back end of that, if they're still more annual or if they're working towards major, log it. Make sure that that contact is tracked in your CRM, because as you do get to the point of managing 15, 30, 50 people, it's hard to keep it all in your head. Ria Wong just had an email come out the other day that talked about the cognitive fatigue that happens from having all of our fundraising processes just living in our mind. So if you're able to put it into a database and it generates a report for you, what a load off your brain, right? So log that. If it didn't happen, if it's not in the database, it didn't happen. So keep yourself on track that way. And then going to the next slide here, as you're thinking about what you're going to take before you get that gift, always be thinking about, what's my end game? What's my next step? How am I going to be using this interaction to move that relationship forward? And then everything, again, gets logged in that database, whether it's thanking them, letting them know about a new program that's being developed, or how you're shifting something that they've already attended in the past, invite them to an event. Christina will talk more about that in a little bit. And then, oh, you can always ask. That doesn't necessarily have to be an in-person ask either. Keeping them on your nice high-touch mailing pieces that you're getting, email lists, all of those things, those are all technically moves that are still deepening that connection. But there's this very fine balance between what those high touch asks could be. Those are the coffee meetings, those are the building tours, those are the like galas and things that you're inviting them to be part of, and the light touches. Thank you notes, calls from your executive director, a picture drawn by some kids during an after school activity. All of those things together really help that donor feel that you care, that they are connected to your work, and that they're making a difference with their support. You're muted, Christina.
I said, let's move on to the exciting part, the strategies. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of great strategies, and we definitely, as I said before, we might have a question. Let me just check on that. Um, Let's really quickly answer this question. The person says, I would love to know more about the recommendations for portfolio size. I'm a mid-level officer with a caseload of 600 people. Would you recommend a bigger team or to change the threshold for mid-level donors? We have one strategy, the 3 and 9, that might help you whittle this down a little. But Carlin, did you want to say something else?
That's a lot, and I feel for you. I guess I'd be curious if your organization has a wealth screening database, or if you might even consider outsourcing, if you don't have a database, outsourcing that to a company that can do it on a per record basis. Because if you have 600 people in your pipeline and the majority of them have a giving capacity of less than $10,000, depending on how your organization defines mid level giving, that may not be how you could start that portfolio development.
Yeah, so it might be
Yeah.
that tiered approach. Let's hang on for
Yeah.
some of these strategies, and I hope that helps out a little bit. So, okay, so strategy number one, processes within your own database. And I think I lost my friend, but I'm still here. So we want to be pulling a monthly multi-gift report. What is that? We want to review the donors in your own database to identify repeat givers and potential mid-level donors. That's something really important that you can be doing at any time. And then we want to be looking at giving behavior, and I'll talk more about this step by step. We want to look at the number of gifts someone has given. How recently did they give? What was that recent gift? What was their first ever gift? This is going to be a really big indicator for us. So we want to be looking at the donation amount each time, each gift, and then we want to see three things. Are they upgrading, downgrading, or renewing? Let's go through those each. One, what does it mean if they're upgrading? And this is, let's use our friend who asked the question and has 600 people in her portfolio. If they're upgrading, green flag, keep them in there. They are great for regular outreach, handwritten cards, phone calls, things like that. What does it mean if they are renewing? Fantastic, great. What can you make, what can you do to make them love you more? That's going to be phone calls. That's going to be newsletters that you have. Carlin, I love the example you kept giving of like cards from the kids that are using the programs. I think that's really cute and sweet. Event invites, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. So I think of this as we talked about your upgrading donors are like your top tier, then your renewing donors are like your middle tier that you can work on as you've got time. And then we have your group of those that are downgrading. So think to yourself, if you see someone giving less in their most recent gift or a series of most recent gifts, that could mean a couple of things. Are you asking them for more each time? Are you communicating that the need is still great? Um, I would be picking up the phone and calling them and leaving a voicemail. A voicemail is fine and lovely. And most of the time, you are going to leave a voicemail and people are not going to pick up. So go ahead and leave that voicemail. Handwrite a card. That is so very meaningful to get a little greeting card in the mail with a little first class stamp, A plus. And then finally, Have they been giving more frequently, but less each time? That's not necessarily a downgrade. So if instead of somebody giving $100 a year one time, they've been giving $75 a year two times or something like $50 a year a couple of times, that's not necessarily a downgrade. It maybe means that their financial situation has shifted and they like to give in a different way, and that's potentially fine. Here's one that I absolutely love. I like to think of events as not just for fundraising, but they can really help you with your mid-level and major donors. And I'm sorry, my voice is going, so I'm going to turn this over to you in just a minute, Carlin. Um, please use your events as a tool for mid-level giving. So that means save some tickets for those mid-level donors. As you are working on an event and you're calculating the cost for meals and drinks and the location and all the different things roll into the overall price per person attending, the price of a ticket. What if you were to give away free tickets to mid-level donors? And I'm not talking about a lot of free tickets. I'm talking about like 6 to 10. And then call those mid-level donors up, the ones that are at the cream of your crop. For our friend with the 600 people, she'd be calling her like top 20 or something like that to say, please come to our event. It would be my pleasure to offer you 2 free tickets and invite a friend. One-on-one interactions, that special invite is gold. So I would really think of your events having multiple purposes, inviting people for free, and also a fundraising thing. All right, Carlin.
Yes. So I'll say it again. Track your touches. Make sure everything that you're doing is in your database, including your research. When you find articles that are pertinent to that donor, plop it in your CRM. If you are working on the outreach yourself, or if you've got a board member that's connected to that individual, maybe it's your ED, anyone else from your organization, make sure if you're the one in charge of that, you're logging who did that outreach and what the outreach was. And then if there were any outcomes or next steps that you structured from that. Again, this is an 8-year average of getting this person to be a mid-level donor if they're an existing donor with you, or potentially they're in that 50% that are coming in with the first gift, but they've been aware of you for a long time. So keeping everything logged in there. The other thing is, we all work in development. We have a high turnover job for the most part. And having this is like leaving little breadcrumbs for anyone that may come after you if you move up in your organization or if you move on to a different organization. That way, all of your hard work doesn't totally go out the window just because it's a brand new person managing that relationship. So track those touches for your success and the success of anyone that comes after you. So here's an actionable strategy that you can take. If you have 600 people in your pipeline, this is a great place to start. If you have 15 people and you just can't quite get traction with them. Let's say you've worked somewhere for a couple years and every couple months you're like, gosh, this donor used to give us $5,000 and I sent her an email a couple months ago and I guess I'll send her an email again and see what happens. That's not super effective in getting a response. So this is a slightly more aggressive approach that you can take that tends to prompt a response because of its more aggressive nature. So this is 3 touches in 9 days. So it's potentially 1 email, 1 call, and then maybe that third touch is a text message or a LinkedIn message, some other way that you're going to get a hold of them. Honestly, even a snail mail letter with your business card in there saying, I've been trying to get a hold of you. I'd love to meet you. Those are kind of 3 touches that you can take in this short amount of time. The reality is that for most people, they will be like, oh my gosh, Carlin keeps calling me. And then either get back to you and say, I would love to meet and learn more about that program you were telling me about, or say, now's not a good time. I'm gathering all my documents for tax season. This is too crazy. Call me in May. Or I just like to give when I see your pieces, when I've attended your events. I don't necessarily need a personal relationship with your organization. Those are all really good things to know. All should be logged in your database. And then it helps you inform what your next steps are with that person. So if you're really working through a pipeline of hundreds of people, this is a great way that you can maybe prioritize the first 20 that have given you a meaningful gift that you think have capacity after that. And then say, all right, I'm going to hit it hard with these 20 people over the next 9 days and see what kind of responses I can get. Don't discount the amount of time that this will take for you. It is an exercise in mental capacity and in your time management in order to make those phone calls and then have the prompt follow up. It's easy to do the first one, but then doing another one 3 or 4 days later when you're like, I just talked to them, they might feel, or I just tried to get a hold of them, they might feel like I'm bugging them too much. That's the point, actually. You want them to ultimately give you a yes or a no, hopefully. Don't do this with brand new prospects or people that may have had a rift with the organization in the past and there just hasn't been the right person to open the door back to them, even though they've stayed involved. But if you know that there's people that have attended your events recently, they have given you a gift recently, that's kind of a good group that can rise to the top of who you could look at doing. I wouldn't recommend more than 8 to 10 people at a time for this, but yeah, again, so changing up what your channel is, making sure that it's a couple different methods. And then if your goal is to invite them for a tour, or if your goal is to meet them for coffee, make sure that as you're doing your outreach, that is continued to be state so that they understand what exactly it is that you're trying to get out of that outreach. So it's trying to get a meeting. It's not asking for money. Not at this point. We're still working on warming up that relationship before you get there. And of course, if they say no, don't keep going. It's as simple as that.
I like this one a lot because I feel like it sort of knocks some people out, and a no is a great answer. That is a fine answer, as you said.
It's my
So,
second favorite answer.
um, okay, so final thought, stewarding mid-level donors. Remember, mid-level is a range, as we've talked about. Upgrading people within the range is great. Any kind of upgrade, wonderful. But we would encourage you to develop a mid-level giving program. So that is special newsletters, event invites, as we talked about, curated experiences. And Carlin, I think if you want to expand on the curated experiences, but awareness of the program can really inspire people to tell their friends about this beautiful mid-level program you have too, so it can help spread the word. Any additional thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've stressed over and over again today that this is a real personal assessment, right? So, what your middle third is for your organization is going to be different than every other person's on this call for the most part. So, when you take a look at, sorry, Christina, I think I'm jumping into the next slide here.
Oh,
Um, Thank you. You can kind of test how it is that you are doing your assessment of those donors.
uh,
It's easy when you're looking at your annual gifts that are coming in. You know, you've got your holiday mailing. Oh, they gave me $1,500 this year. You log it in, but maybe you don't take a look and say, "Gosh, they only gave $1,000 last year, and this year they stepped up to 1,500." That's a sign, and I hope that that is a sign that you are then doing some additional stewardship touches and really testing how it is that your organization is responding to the people that are in your mid-level range. And if you're not doing anything different, that's where the opportunity to potentially develop this mid-level giving program is going to come into play, because there's a, if they really are only 7% of your active donors, but they're making up 35 to 40% of that middle revenue, that's a lot when it compounds together. But individually, it's easy to overlook them, especially if you're constantly looking at the horizon for who your $25,000 plus donors are going to be, and not taking into account just how important and a bulk of your annual fund are coming from those mid-level groups.
yeah, yeah. No, I am so glad you rolled into the next one. What a beautiful segue.
Sorry.
No, it's great. So we're going to wrap this up, and I know we've gone over by a couple of minutes. So here are your four key takeaways from what we've talked about today. As Carlin was saying, essentially test your organization and do some internal research. As we said, what percentage of your file is mid-level and what amount is coming from them? Then you have your own numbers. And how are you stewarding them? Differently, not differently? That's something to really be aware of as you go into this. So a self-evaluation. Then pull a monthly gift report. So review your donor database, identify those repeat givers, those potential mid-level donors. And then, as Carlin was saying, trim that portfolio to that workable 30 to 50 people. To our friends out there who have more, we feel you and we hope that maybe this will work for you at some point. And then test that 3 and 9 strategy. with like 8 to 10 people. And remember, a no is an answer too, because it puts the person off to the side and you can say, hey, I'm not going to talk to them for a little while and I'm going to concentrate on the people that said yes to me. So we would love to open this up now for any questions that the group has. You are also very welcome if you want to tell us how many people are in your portfolio. Was there, if maybe that's cathartic for you. Um, you can find some friends that have similar sizes. If you have any other strategies that we have not mentioned, we would be very welcome to hearing those and sharing them with the group. So. Carlin, as we're wrapping this up, think back, how many people have you ever had in your portfolio?
A great question. I think I blacked it out. When I was at a large university, we typically aimed to have 20 people in each tier. So 20 people for the 1 year turnaround, 20 people for the 2 year turnaround, and 20 for the three. But they always migrate, right? So you may connect with a donor, find out that they're going through some family things, they move down. Then you look through that second year people, see who can move up and fill that spot. Maybe someone brand new comes on. That's always
Yeah,
the best. And then you figure out where to fill them into.
yeah, perfect, perfect. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at time, and I think we're great to say thank you so much, everyone, for sticking with us through this. We'll send out a recording afterwards. We appreciate your time. If you have any questions or want to share success stories with us, please let us know. I'm Christina at Carl Bloom. Thanks, friends. Have a lovely day. Happy fundraising.
Yes, thank you. Good luck.
Bye.